So I would like to start us off on rules 3701-86. These are the newborn safety incubator rules. As you can see, we received several public comments regarding these rules. And at this time, what I would like to do is to have Selena Jackson from program go over the changes, the posting period, and then the comments that were received, and we can move forward for additional public comment.
Hi, just to start there, this chapter is being moved forward as no change. The stakeholders involved and the authorized entities to receive a surrendered infant all agreed that the rules as they're written met the intent and were sufficient at this time. We wanted to ensure that the staffing requirements particularly remained in place, that requires that an individual who is authorized to receive a child, that being a law enforcement officer, an EMS provider, or a hospital worker, take possession of a child, that individual be in place 24 hours a day should an infant be surrendered to one of these units. And I just want to clarify for everyone, the use of the term incubator is often misleading. These are not incubators. They are in no way an environmentally sealed unit. There is no one standard of manufacture or design. The rules as they're written require that there be a portal door installed in the wall that can either be hooked up to the telephone system or the electric system with an alarm that will notify the facility, inside the facility, when the door is open and an infant is surrendered. The receptacle that the infant can be placed in is required to be at least a medical style bassinet that is anchored to the floor. So there are a multitude of ways that the intent of this rule can be met in terms of how that device or that unit and that access to surrender that infant are set up. We did receive 2 comments and a multitude of questions in the form of an opinion, a request from the Attorney General's office for clarification on behalf of one of the locations that has one of these units installed. The intent of those questions was to determine whether that 24-hour staffing was absolutely required and whether it could be met by alternate means. That is a no. We did not change our stance on the 24-hour supervision because we feel that the safety of that infant is paramount in these cases. We also received comments and concerns regarding the perception that a number of these locations may not be abiding by or understanding these rules, particularly when it came to staffing, which is ultimately why we received that request for clarification as to that 24-hour staffing rule. Also, there were questions and concerns regarding the devices that are being installed in these units that are being purchased from one organization out of Indiana called the Safe Haven Baby Box organization. They have designed an all-in-one type of unit that they are aggressively marketing a number of states, including Ohio. And the questions involved those all-in-one units coming with the organization's telephone number, information that is not approved by nor endorsed by the state of Ohio or the Ohio Department of Health. It just happens to be what that organization places on there. There are also questions regarding the literature that has been handed out at a few of these units, apparently, that also comes from that organization and is not, in fact, the state of Ohio medical form or brochure about the Safe Haven program that is controlled by the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services. Job and Family Services maintains authority over that Safe Haven umbrella program. Now, safe haven infant surrender laws have been in place for quite some time across the United States, and that has allowed individuals to surrender an infant up to 30 days directly to an individual at a fire station, at a hospital, or at a law enforcement agency. We have only authority over this carve-out area that is specific to these newborn safety incubator units that are being installed. And if you'd like to ask some direct questions, I could talk forever about this, but if there are particular questions, please ask them.
So just to clarify, these locations have to be registered with the Ohio Department of Health prior
Yes, they
to
do.
installing them?
They are to submit an attestation of compliance before they open and allow the use of these devices.
Okay. So what happens when that's not submitted?
If that is not submitted and we're not aware of the unit, we would typically be informed by someone's complaint, someone pointing that out to us, and then we would take action, contact them, and it would ultimately be turned over to our legal department for enforcement purposes. There is no approval process involved in these units.
Great, thank you. That clarifies one of the questions I had. With that, I would like to turn it over to the board and other members if there are specific questions regarding the public comments that were received or the communication regarding the questions around that were submitted to the Attorney General's office, or just the rule package itself.
What is it?
It's for your vaginal work.
Okay, I'm in a meeting.
Dr. Long, can you mute yourself, please?
Yes.
Okay, any questions for program regarding these sets of rules?
Yes, Selena, this is Diane Dietz, and just could you restate your comments related to the safe haven organizations and your oversight? I mean, again, looking at the brochure, you know, it does have the Ohio Department of Health on there, and it seems like this consumer has concerns about these organizations.
We do not have oversight of the Safe Haven Baby Box organization. They are a manufacturer of these units. There is no approval process for the design or manufacture of these units. They have to meet our stated rule requirements. So we have not been involved in any type of oversight or review of the materials that they have been providing to these locations. And again, our law and our rule do not prohibit another organization from providing information, but we do not endorse it either. And I think Amy or even James Hodge, our chief of the Bureau of Regulatory Operations, can speak to the investigation or the follow through that is going on with several of these locations now.
Are they with
Thank you,
us today?
Selena. I am here. This is James Hodge. I'm the Chief of Regulatory Operations. Unfortunately, with these being ongoing investigations, I can't really comment on the substance of what's occurring. However, once that investigation is complete, the individual company or township or the individual that installed the baby box and has the oversight over it, they'll be receiving our notice and our findings of that investigation. My apologies, I can't be more forward today.
That is fine. Thank you for chiming in with that.
Thank you, James.
Jane, do you have any?
Hey, James, this is Teresa Long. Could you share with us if there's one or more than one, or how many investigations there might be going on in Ohio presently?
There's one investigation going on. There's another where we were basically identifying and pulling additional information. It's more of an RFI, so we're just requesting information. There is
Gotcha.
one specific locality that does have an investigation that's ongoing.
Great. Thank you so much.
Great. Any other questions for James or Selena regarding 3701-86? Okay, with that, I do believe we have a member from the public on today that is requesting to address the board prior to any recommendation we would make. So with that, I would turn it over to Mr. Christopher Hicks for public comment.
Okay, I was following the agenda, so I didn't think this would be till later, but I appreciate it being proximate to when the discussion of the rule is. So I provided, and I don't know if Ms. Webb can put on the screen, but I provided what I'm going to read, but I also provided a set of exhibits, which she may be able to put on the screen so everybody can see it. So as I read, there's exhibits that go with it. So let me just begin and go through it, and then I'm glad to take questions. And you'll get a feeling for how familiar I've become with these. So my name is Christopher Hicks. I live at 444 Woodwick Court in Cincinnati, Ohio. A baby box was recently installed in my home township. I knew nothing about them. I was concerned because, unlike other places, my township did not get any private donations for the box. As I dug in, I was surprised to find that ODH rules were ignored, and private company contractual terms that seemed to be sloppy or contrary to the public interest were in place. I appreciate the chance to speak as you look at the rules. Please follow along with the exhibits on the pages after this as I read. Safe Haven Exhibit 1 is not new and is a simple idea. Surrender a baby face-to-face, hand-to-hand to an authorized person, an approach that can give insight as to the mother's need for medical attention and that baby and mom seem fit. It has not been well promoted. Exhibit 2 is simple promotion used in other states. We do not have it in Ohio. No one makes big money from traditional Safe Haven. Safe Haven with a box in the middle is newer. It is Exhibit 3. It affords anonymity for mothers and makes a commitment to an authorized person being always present. It has become a 7-figure business for a sole provider wrapped in press conferences, politics, and photo ops. Exhibit 4 is the photo op in my township. As in Exhibit 5, many of these take on a religious zeal. And although we have not had a box surrender in Ohio, Exhibit 6 shows that everyone is a press event. Events that in small towns are contrary to anonymity. They make changing your mind hard for a mother. As shown in Exhibit 7, box surrender babies are tracked, monitored, and used in fundraising events by the private company. Why does the company that made a box have anything to do with babies after surrender? If you dare to ask a question like I did, you get smeared on TikTok. That is example 8. I was smeared for having requested a copy of a pamphlet. In Ohio, we have 6 of these boxes and more on the way. This is a perfect time to look at the rules, both yours and those of the sole source provider. I found your rules were largely ignored. Logging, as in Exhibit 9, did not have a proper form, did not record sanitation, and the alarm test would not comply with the Ohio Administrative Code. As I asked questions to government, some things started to change. Exhibit 10 is a new log. It adds a column with the word sanitize spelled wrong. As I asked questions, I found the ODJFS brochure, Exhibit 11, and its Help Me Grow phone number was being consciously hidden by the supplier. Exhibit 12 is a promotional brochure from the supplier that is provided instead of the state form. Exhibit 13 is the ODJFS Voluntary Anonymous Medical History form that was also being hidden in favor of a private company disclosure form, Exhibit 14, that is not anonymous. The ODJFS items are now being included in most places because of me challenging local governments. But how beholden has government become? My township tried to get the Attorney General to give the okay to keep not including the state pamphlet and form. They lost. The ORC is clear. Exhibit 15 is a one-page health Q&A that looks like it was never reviewed by a professional and isn't included in these boxes. Look at the last question. It directs women in Ohio to a midwife center in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It says nothing about serious medical and other issues mother and child could have. Exhibit 16 is the phone number sign plastered on the walls of government buildings. Who mans that phone number? What are their qualifications? What advice do they give to mothers? As far as I can tell, no one has asked. I found universal violations of the OAC at all locations for logging, staffing, and forms. Most did not even get building permits, playing dumb that your process meant they could do unpermitted construction. And while electrical is not part of your rules, the sole source provider asked for a 15 amp circuit for its box. Exhibit 17 is 2 excerpts from their contract. One says SHBB represents that the safety device is not tested by a nationally recognized testing laboratory program. And I might not have included, I'm going to go just a little off script here, but they also claim if you get a copy of their contract, I've had this on the chart, SHBB is not the manufacturer. They claim that they're not actually the manufacturer of the box that they sell, and nobody knows who the real quote-unquote manufacturer is. The other disclaims all warranties. So let's talk about your rules. I'm a pro-life, conservative, less regulation type guy, but this needs to be done right. A fear narrative that only boxes can keep babies out of dumpsters, combined with politicians, big money, a sole provider, limited rules, lax oversight, and governments ignoring the rules is a very dangerous mix. I gave rule input. It's Exhibit 18. I did it during the comment period, but somehow it got lost. I had an hour review call with Ms. Walsh and Ms. Jackson. Somehow, though, my input was not included in your materials, and a response was not drafted as with other comments. The attestation form can be tightened. The logging requirements can be cleaned up. There should be standard signage at each location noting "Help Me Grow," the closest hospital, 30 days and under, joint parental decisions, and more. Private company promotional material, baby registries of private companies, and trademarks should be banned at these locations. It's ghoulish what's going on. Women should know at the box that they can knock on a station door for personal help or go to the hospital for a personal surrender and medical services. How about offering compassion to these people? Frankly, why are there all sorts of materials in the bassinet when your rules clearly require that there be no debris in the bassinet? Beyond all of that, we need a robust safe haven program in Ohio, of which a baby box is an option, not a standalone, separate but unequal approach. We need to be sure women and babies are not exploited or tricked to produce no strings attached babies. While a circus draws attention, it is not how we should reach vulnerable moms. Our leading message needs to be on the importance of prenatal care, supervised medical delivery, and informed decisions. Not of secret pregnancy, secret birth, drop box, and hype. Your rules are instrumental in making sure all of this develops the right way in Ohio before it becomes too late to fix it. Thank you, and I'd be glad to answer any questions about my research and my rule input, which I provided several pages of.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Hicks, for providing your public comment. I do think, speaking on behalf of myself, I think you bring some serious concerns to light regarding what seems to be some operating safety boxes not complying with the Ohio Administrative Code. I think we all take, concern that that is a safety issue, both for the child, for the community, and for the families of those impacted by such a decision. With that, I do have a question for Selena regarding Mr. Hicks's comments. So under the authority which these rules are allowed to be created, what authority do we have, or do you have, to impact the administrative rules that are currently in existence? I know some of his proposals may not be in line with what authority the statute provides. If you or James or Socrates could speak to that, that might be helpful for us to get an idea of what authority ODH has in this particular set of rules.
Our authority is limited to the unit itself and the requirements for the installation. The notice requirements, we have set the installation, the training or certification of those installers that are required. For the alarm system, we require that they be a telecommunications specialist or they be an electrician. The individual that makes the hole in the wall has to be a licensed contractor. And we do not have authority over anything that is outside of that, such as the brochures, the distribution of the brochures, anything that falls under the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, we do not have authority to impact. James, did you want to add anything in addition to that?
Just one small point. The point that Mr. Hicks made about the information, the paperwork, the pamphlets that if they are contained within the box, that would be considered debris. So there shouldn't be that information as pamphlets within that, within the actual box themselves.
And the only recourse actions that we have are to withdraw the, again, there's not an approval process, there's an attestation process. We can withdraw the registration of the location, which essentially allows the location to have the box, and the registrations of those installers if they're found to violate that. But again, we have a current investigation into one unit. We don't send individuals out to look at these units. We do not have the authority for inspections or penalties in those areas.
May I make a comment?
Sure. Yes.
So for example, 3701-8603C is you regulating the signage requirements. So when I bring up things about the signage requirements, that's completely within your jurisdiction to do so. The statute gives you broad responsibility to create and propagate the rules for these boxes. And so, for example, when I say signage things, there's already a bunch of signage requirements that you've specified in the OAC. So I'm saying that these should be updated to do things like include the Help Me Grow number, the local hospital, maybe the local child and family services, et cetera. But I appreciate your discretion to let me make a comment. I don't want to overstep my bounds.
Thank you.
The agency interpretation of that authority in the past was specific to the signage indicating where the unit was located.
This is Diane Dietz again, and this might be a foolish question because I do not know the parameters of this protection, so to speak, but I guess I'm curious two things. Number one, what happens to these children? And I'm confused with Exhibit 7, where they're using these children as, quote, fundraising. I want to meet some of our babies. Could somebody explain to me a little bit more? I mean, I understand the protection for the mother who abandoned the child would not be criminally held liable, but what happens to the child, and how is this tied into some type of fundraising activities?
The activities that you speak to have absolutely nothing to do with our rules or our authority. That is something that is happening on behalf of that agency, of that organization. And they do this in other states. They operate, their location is in Indiana, and this is becoming far more frequent in the states where they're aggressively marketing these units. What happens under Safe Haven, the existing Safe Haven law that has been in place for quite some time, probably 2 decades now almost. The children are taken in by the authorized individuals, and then Children's Services is called. If the child is in need of medical attention, they are taken to the hospital, and then Children's Services takes over. And the children are put through the process there, they are fostered, and ultimately they may be adopted.
So to restate this, which is good, I was hoping that was the answer. So to restate this, they're trying to fundraise to create donations to create more of these boxes and drop-off locations throughout the state. And that's what they're really doing here by showing, here's some of our children who have been successfully adopted. I'm assuming that's what their position is.
That is my assumption as well. Again, that is outside of our authority. We are not involved with that in any way.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one question regarding the statutes under which these rules are promulgated. Section 2151.3532. There is a section that defines costs for registering and regulating incubators and fees to cover those costs. Because there is no, as you say, registration, does this section of the statute give ODH authority to have a registration process? And if it does it also give the agency authority to have a cost associated with that process?
We were given the authority to charge for registration, which is included in the rules.
But your rules, the registration is passive, correct? They just have to attest that they meet these requirements?
Correct.
Is there a specific reason why we have continued to leave that section in place if these are under 5-year rule review? I guess my question, Selena, is if you have authority to take it to the next step, especially as more of these boxes may be coming online that do not comply with ODH's rules, is there a specific reason why you have not instituted a formal registration policy?
I'm going to defer to James Hodge, our Chief of the Bureau of Regulatory Operations.
Well, Bobby.
I don't believe it's. I don't believe the reasoning for building out that area was something that executive leadership or the Department of Health made that determination. We lean in very heavily on the SMEs in the area with the stakeholders that attended the rule review meetings, and so that's why the recommendation in this area is to keep the rules as such. When the stakeholder meeting occurred, there was consensus amongst the members that that the rules as they were currently defined were good for no change during this period. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of our process.
It does answer my question, but I also think it brings up a good point. To piggyback on that further, who did you identify as the stakeholders and who attended those meetings with the agency?
I want to point out that it is in fact a registration process. The fee is collected and the attestation requirements are not unique to this program. We have attestation requirements for other programs such as our healthcare services. Those that were in attendance were representatives from the Ohio Hospital Association, the Ohio chapter of the Family Practitioners, the Ohio chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, representatives from the Fraternal Order of Police, the Fire Chiefs Association. I can actually, if you'll give me a second to pull this up.
So while you're looking for that, just to clarify for the board, and I think the public tuning in, there is a registration that has to be provided and a fee associated with that. Is that?
Oh, yes.
correct?
Yes, the installers and the locations provide us with an attestation that is considered their registration, and they are put on the list of registered locations and registered installers.
And what is the fee for that?
Deb, can you speak to those specific numbers, please?
Sure, this is Deborah Walsh. I actually supervise the running of the program. Let me see, the fee, I believe, is $250 for a location, but hang on one second, it might actually be a little more. I have to find the rule. It might be 01. Okay, 3701-86-01A. This is what the location that is going to utilize box has to do. They complete the registration form. They attest that they are in compliance with all the laws and regulations, and they submit a non-refundable fee of $500. Every year, they have to submit an annual attestation that says we are still in compliance. I
Great,
apologize, it's not every year, it's every 3 years.
Every 3 years. Yeah, great. Thank you. I think I just wanted to make sure that that point was well known for the board, that there is a process. And I would just again reiterate that if there are locations that are operating outside of these specific rules, I would encourage the public to continue to report those to the agency, where further investigation should take place, whether it be through the Bureau or through legal counsel's office regarding those locations not operating in compliance with 3701-86. So with that, that concludes my questions. Are there any other questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, I did have a question for Mr. Hicks. You started off your testimony saying that unlike other places, my township did not get any private donations for the box. Can you just explain to me what you meant by that?
So yes, but one thing I want to add before I say that is that I appreciate the code reference, the revised code reference that was made under section C. If everybody would notice there that it specifically calls on you guys to create the guidelines for manufacturing and manufacturer standards. So that's just something else to note. It's specifically within your purview. But in terms of fundraising, the organization, the sole source provider, does a lot of fundraising. In most locations, they use this to raise a bunch of money to pay for the box because it's very much associated with the pro-life movement. So they'll raise a bunch of money, sometimes more than the box cost. And then that gets, ultimately the contract gets signed with the township, for example. And the money, as far as I've seen from looking at the 4 fire station ones in Ohio, always transfers through the township, not as a direct donation. And that's what's happening. So it struck me as odd when, if you actually go look at the reports from this company, they claim on their website that they're totally funded by private donations, but that's not really true. And in my township, the township, I think, paid 11 grand, including the ODH fees, and then another like 4 or 5 grand for the construction work. And currently they're paying $700 something a day for a fireman to monitor the box, and that's all taxpayer money. So, but just historically, the Safe Haven Baby Box Provider Company has touted that this is a good way to raise money. So they try to, in a lot of, every place other than where I live, it seems like the local government had some sort of fund drive off of it to raise money for putting the box in.
Thank you.
Selena or James, do you want to speak to section C of the statute that authorizes the agency to create manufacturing and manufacturer standards?
Sure. When we originally wrote these rules, we recognized the limitations of the expertise available to the Ohio Department of Health. And we feel that we did meet the intent of that statute in the standards that we have set in requiring the licensure or registration or training and experience of those that do the installations, and the type of the requirements for the portal door and the alarm system, as well as the use of a medical bassinet that has already been well vetted and is available on the market.
And I would add to Selena's, the bassinet has to be in compliance with 21 CFR 880.5145, and that's set forth in 3701 8604 C1.
Great, thank you. Other questions from the board to program regarding 3701-86?
Garrett, this is Adam. I have a couple questions on that.
Garrett. Oh, good.
Go ahead, Adam.
Okay. So I'm looking at the rules, there are the ability for ODH to fine folks for violations of these rules. So is this a complaint-based inspection process? Does ODH go out on site when you have complaints on this? Is anyone, I guess, ever on site looking at the boxes at any point in the process? Because, you know, being someone who does regulations, usually if I regulate something, I want to at least see it at some point in its lifespan. So I'm just curious on that.
That's a great question.
I'll let James speak to enforcement, but this is not a program where our surveyors would go out without cause. This is a complaint-based system.
James, do you have anything to add to that regarding 3701-86-06, the compliance action section?
Not really. It is complaint based. And, you know, based upon the evidence that we find, that, you know, the director may take action and impose penalties based upon that investigation.
Great, thank you. Adam, do you have any additional questions?
No, that answered it for me, Garrett. Thank you.
Hey, Garrett, it's Teresa.
Yes, Dr. Long, go ahead.
So I really appreciate the good conversation. Obviously, there has been conversation with the Ohio Department of Health, and Mr. Hicks, I appreciate your coming to the meeting today and making a thoughtful presentation. You've clearly put a lot of effort into learning about this and being able to share about it. So I do appreciate that. What I'm wondering, and I don't know, it may be for you, Mr. Hicks, or it could be for the program leads, is your concern only about these that are held in townships, or is it also about hospital or other facility held boxes? And I'm wondering, I've heard different numbers today, how many different boxes are there and how many by location type?
Was that a question for, can I answer that question, or is somebody else, would you like, is somebody else supposed to answer?
If program staff is able,
start.
if program staff is able to give us a review on how many you have registered, I think that would be helpful. And then Mr. Hicks, if you would like to chime in regarding Dr. Long's question regarding the location, that will suffice.
Deb, please correct me if I'm wrong. I believe we have 6 locations. They are installed primarily in the fire and EMS locations. And I believe that the issues that have been encountered with these locations concerning the 24-hour staffing are essentially based in this arena, because many of these fire stations are volunteer based, are not staffed 24/7 or staffed at the level where a staff member would be left behind. And unlike the overriding safe haven law whose statute actually reads that an employee of those agencies may take possession of a surrendered child, our authorizing statute for these devices specifically requires an authorized individual to be available. So that is where some of these staffing issues have come into play. Whereas for a hospital or a police station, they are 24 hours a day on a routine basis typically.
Thank you. And
I would add, there's seven locations. Sorry, not 6, there's 7.
So this is Teresa again. So does that mean that hospitals are really not a part of that 7, or if any or all hospitals are willing to be involved in this, and you mentioned police stations as well. Would that number greatly expand if you included them? And would they use these boxes and have this kind of situation, or it only really be 7 locations?
There
Deb,
are
again-
7 locations registered. 2 of
Is
them are
one a
at
hospital?
hospital locations. 2 are hospital locations. 5 are fire stations, basically.
Thank you.
Right. And I can give you a little history from the original drafting of these rules. At that time, hospitals did not display a significant interest in having these installed and were more supportive of the actual physical transfer of the child from the surrendering parent.
If I could just comment very quickly, I think that the company, the sole source provider, focuses on fire stations, and it's not a township thing. It's this happens to be most of them at our fire stations happen to be in townships. And so I think they focus on fire stations because things like a hospital, I think, would question the paperwork going into the box and the Q&As because you'd have medical professionals there. So I think that there's a conscious effort to focus on fire stations, but also in a township from a aggressive marketing approach. In a county, there's lots of fire stations to market to. Lots of fire stations. There's only maybe 1 or 2 hospitals. And I think that's what you're getting, is that this whole thing is being skewed by the aggressive marketing of a provider of the box and their fundraising drives off of it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions?
I wanted to make another comment. I wanted to let the board know that based on Mr. Hicks's comments and our conversations with him, program will be developing educational materials that will be made available to the existing locations and any potential locations, as well as on our website specific to these devices, that will go more in depth as to what the expectations and requirements are. We want to avoid any issues with potential location making statements that they are not aware of what the law and the rules are.
Great, thank you. Any additional questions from the board regarding 3701-86?
Garrett, I'm sorry, I got one more thing. I'm sorry to come back.
Go ahead, Adam.
I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this right. Mr. Hicks, from what I'm hearing, I'm thinking that this has to do with really a manufacturer more so than the rule package itself. It's a manufacturer maybe doing things that are a little outside of what perhaps they should be doing. And so perhaps addressing things with that manufacturer through program might alleviate some of those concerns. Are there concerns with the actual rule package that exists, or is it just the enforcement thereof in this manufacturer?
From my perspective, in my feedback and in the rule feedback that I provided, which was like the last exhibit in my deck, is I think that the rules should be improved upon for things like the signage, which I think are the manufacturer standards, because those that have dealt with the sole source provider would know they're very aggressive. And they regularly you can go out to their TikTok channel and they regularly demonize your department, okay, is not knowing what you're doing. And they've basically supplanted and hip checked it out of the mix. And it's just super aggressive. So these people think that out in the field, these townships and stuff where you have politicians that are not medically versed, they think this is a great photo op, and then they think that this company represents the law, so that the contract they have is the law, not you guys are the law. So that's why I think you see a lot of these things, and I think there's a tremendous. And I think if you guys went to, I have not talked to somebody there, but if you went to the Indiana Department of Health, where there's like 100 of these boxes, I would bet you would get feedback that they wish they would have got ahead of this curve. Because I think it's like a circus, basically, of aggressive marketing in these boxes and a lot of money. I mean, these boxes, this is a 7-figure thing. And a lot of times, and it just, not to go too far off Sunder here, because I appreciate so much discretion, is that I got to learn about these things and how important it was that safe haven programs encourage medically supervised delivery of babies and then safe haven surrender. versus an approach that I say it, it's bad to say it the way I'm going to say it, but is keep your baby secret, have it in the back of your car and dump it in a box. And so we need to make sure that this program isn't stigmatizing young women into an approach where it seems to suggest to them that the way to do this is in secret. Because last time I checked, to have a medically supervised birth, you can't do that in secret. And so I apologize for going off there, but I am a very pro-life person. And I thought at first, well, this is great. Just why didn't we do private fundraising? Then I saw how aggressive this operation was and how sloppy the paperwork was, how the non-compliance with the laws. And I just think that this is an area that is an opportunity I'd suggest you guys go talk to them in Indiana. I've never talked to anybody in Indiana, and see what they would have done if they were starting where we are, where right now you're at a point where we have enough boxes to know what's going on, but not so many that there's not an opportunity to clean up this process.
Well, I appreciate that very much. And I think you have brought up some really good points, and you've had some great conversation with program staff who oversee the development of these rules. Just to recap for your information, and again, for the board's perspective, our authority is limited in this matter. The Public Health Advisory Board simply has authority to either recommend approval or recommend disapproval to the Director of Health. We do not have authority to not move these rules forward. We do not have authority to modify them. So with that, I think we can call the conversation piece on this. I would just highlight back to staff again that as you start developing materials, I would encourage you to continue to cast a wide net for stakeholder input. I think Mr. Hicks should definitely be involved in that process where appropriate moving forward. And with that,
if I could just add, also to keep in mind that the Ohio Department of Health's authority or ability to influence is limited in respect to how this particular company may interact with local government and local politicians. We simply don't have any ability to influence that. So if the local politician chooses to buy into the fairly aggressive marketing of this company as has been portrayed here, I'm not sure we can do anything about that. We will certainly look at our rules and at the materials to ensure that there is awareness of the laws and how to comply with them. Beyond that, I'm not sure how much we can influence that process.
Great.
Mr. Chair,
yes, absolutely.
Mr. Hicks, in what Socrates just mentioned is what was kind of floating around in my mind as you were talking about how this company aggressively markets their products. Have you done, and also the in-depth work that you've done in researching all of this, have you met with any legislators? Have you looked at the legislative fix to some of your concerns?
No, I haven't, because I think that the predominant thing here, like for example, the manufacturer and manufacturing standards, that's on you guys. That's on the ODH and versus. So I'm not thinking it's a legislative solution that puts it into law, permanent law per se. But I do think that there's areas that maybe beyond this 5-year review something needs to happen with, because I do take exception to the idea that there's not a rule for you guys in terms of having some sort of regulatory involvement with the manufacturers and the manufacturing of these devices, which is specifically, as I pointed out in the statute, that's one of your responsibilities.
Great, thank you. So at this time, if there are no further questions regarding 3701-86, I will entertain a motion from the advisory board. Is there a motion to recommend approval for, is there a motion to recommend approval of these rules moving forward to the director? Is there anyone willing to make any motion?
So this is Teresa, and I am willing to make the motion as in support of the approval. And this is not a part of it. I am hopeful that our colleagues at the Ohio Department of Health, both program, legal, enforcement, have really understood, I think, the seriousness and some of the issues in what Mr. Hicks has brought up. But I am willing to move approval of the rule package as put forth.
Thank you, Dr. Long. Is there a second to recommend approval? Hearing no second at this time. So no second, the motion dies, as I understand it. Is there a motion to recommend denial of, or recommend not approval of these rules?
Well, if I can.
Yes,
Yeah.
Socrates, please.
Please, yes.
Dr. Long, to your comment, we at the Department of Health, we are very serious about our rules. And to the extent that we have authority to enforce the rules, we make efforts to do so. And we will, and like any of these others, enforce those rules. A lot of what Mr. Hicks raised is serious concerns. How much of that is within the scope of our authority, we will have to take a look at. Certainly, to the extent that we can, we will make efforts along those lines. Some of, like I mentioned, some of it is just outside of our purview. How local politicians interact with this company is just not something we can control. How they market themselves, not within our control. So we will have to look at those kinds of issues and try to suss out what it is that we can actually influence within the scope of these rules and what it is that we can't. And so I think the rules right now, based on the process that we've gone through, is about as strong as we can make them for the moment. Not discounting anything that's been discussed, but we're more than happy to relook at them at any time as we progress forward. Keep in mind, this is still, one of the things I think should be noted in the memo that came up with the program is that, to our knowledge anyway, there's not been a baby surrendered in this process. So while this may be a great photo op for local politicians, it's not something that's actually being used. Is there still concerns? Sure. But it's not something that we can necessarily, those particular concerns may not be within the scope of the Department of Health.
And thank you, Socrates, just to, I think, I'll speak for myself. I'm not sure where the hesitation is coming from everyone, but I think it's the idea of having that unsupervised birth. And again, that whole idea of having a vehicle, aka a box, that is being encouraged through the state of Ohio that does lend itself to secrecy and not the care of the human person, both human people, but let's just say the mother, that I think we all are very concerned about. And so I think that's where at least my hesitation is coming from, to say, sure, let's go forward with these rules. It's, how to really address that. And within the purview of what we can really do.
Right.
I think I'm just challenged in my head.
And I completely understand that. The statute says this is an option.
Yes.
And that's the General Assembly that created that option.
Yes.
We're doing the best we can to ensure that the option is exercised as safely and as appropriately as possible. Obviously, a medically supervised birth is the ideal, and that is where we should all go. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. I think the question is, the General Assembly created this option. It's not that we can say, no, General Assembly, you made a mistake and we're not going to enforce it. We have to follow through on that.
But we could create, no, I'm so sorry, but we could create rules to try to enhance the protection of the mother. I know the rule package as it stands right now doesn't really have, I read it, trying to see where we can, we could
Sure.
plug that in, but moving forward as a Department of Health, we could add to the rule package things to try to protect the mother? Am I out of my
We can
realm
certainly
here?
work with Job and Family Services about the overall state aid program, which is, as indicated by the program, not within the scope of our authority. We work these boxes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we do. Is there a role for us in the larger conversation? Sure. But it is not within our authority to promulgate those kinds of rules. Should we be promoting? And we do. The department works very tirelessly to promote the health and safety of not just the mother, but also the infant. We have various programs at Health and throughout the state that do this. We've even conducted massive research operations to figure out better ways to make those health connections happen. For example, based on our own research with multiple agencies and multiple data sets, we came up with a process by which a single application can be used for both Medicaid, for WIC, and for various other services within Job and Family Services, within health, within other agencies to support a healthy pregnancy. Is it perfect? No. And I don't think, we still have too many mothers dying. We still have too many infants dying. We recognize that, but it's a multi-agency, multi-level exercise that involves not just government, but also private sectors, government, hospitals, and both in local government as well. Does it all work together? No, not as well as we would like. Given the world we live in, and unfortunately, there's a lot of polarization. There's a lot of various perspectives that don't always align with each other. So we work with what we have and do the best we can with what's given to us.
Well, Mr. Chairman, one last thing for our council and for maybe it's the program. What other feedback have we gotten? I've read some of the comments, but has generally the input been folks accepted? Would we say that there's a preponderance of stakeholders that are in line with moving forward with the rules, or are we having some
My understanding, and I will defer the program for more accurate conversations, but my understanding is that the vast majority of stakeholders are in support of the rules.
Program, can you confirm that for us, that the vast majority of stakeholders are in support of the current rules?
Yes, and I can actually, we were speaking earlier and I was telling you who was involved. I'd like to finish out that list. We had the Department of Job and Family Services, the Association of Police Commissioners, the Ohio Nurses Association, the Hospital Association, Ohio Academy of Family Physicians, Ohio chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics, Ohio Fire Chiefs Association, and the Department of Public Safety Emergency Medical Services Division involved, and they are all in support. And I can tell you the only comments that we received are the ones that we're speaking to today. And typically when we receive comments, they're typically comments against, not comments in support of. We very rarely receive comments in support of the rules. People assume that if they don't speak to us, that we are aware of where they stand.
Great. Do we have Stephanie, go ahead.
Garrett, sorry, I was waiting for a good opportunity. I'm happy to second Dr. Long's motion and just wanted to echo my appreciation of the dialogue today. And I think, although we are potentially recommending to move these rules forward, I think there were a lot of good concerns raised and some topics for future discussion and consideration. And OAJ, as always, is happy to be involved in those conversations. As far as we can be helpful. But with that, Garrett, I'm happy to be a second for the motion.
So to recap, we did get a second for Dr. Long's motion to recommend approval of 3701-86. I appreciate that additional conversation and clarity, both from Socrates from legal and program. Again, our purview in this is limited. I will say on behalf of the chair, I do feel that ODH did engage with a wide range of stakeholders. I think they are the best interested party at this time, and hearing no substantial feedback from them regarding the renewal of these rules, I would entertain a vote to recommend approval. So with that, I will call the vote. All those in favor of recommending approval of 370186, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed? No. Aye.
Thank you, Adam. One opposed. Any abstentions? Great. So those rules will move forward and recommend approval.
I believe you have to take a roll call vote. You have to have recorded votes of public bodies, not yeas and nays by voice votes on such actions.
Would you like to roll call? I don't think it's necessary.
Not within our scope, but we can do it.
It is not within our scope to require a roll call vote under the statute, but I would be happy to call a roll call vote so the record can clearly state who voted for recommending approval. So with that, Michelle, please call the roll.
Jessica Wengert,
Approve.
Sally Morgan,
Yes, approve.
Diane Dietz. Approve. Robert Jennings,
Approve.
Teresa Long, Teresa Long,
She did make a motion, but I do not. Dr. Long, can we hear you? You're cutting out.
I've tried. Hi, it's Teresa, and yes, I approve. My
Thank you.
apologies.
Thank you.
Adam Howard,
No.
Garrett Biozzi,
Yes.
Joanna Pittenger. No vote.
Great. Thank you so much. The rules are recommended for approval to the director. Moving on to the second
Garrett,
item.
Garrett, I'm sorry, and maybe Michelle just skipped me because I had made a motion, but Stephanie Gilligan was for moving the supportive.
Sorry, thank you.
Just
Thank
wanted
you for that.
the record to be accurate.
Yes, I appreciate that.
7-1.
Moving on into our rule review items. Again, Mr. Hicks, thank you for participating today.